Let's look at that. Oh, what do I have here? I have the odds to win the ACC, and it looks like, if my math is correct, Florida State is your favorite.
Woo, that hits different. Even the win total thing, which we're peaked ahead of Clemson, sometimes with non-conference that may play a factor in how you get there. But just to go through the ACC, to go to Charlotte, and to win the whole thing with no divisions, that we're still the favorite, that gets me a little nervous. I don't know about you.
I don't get nervous about this. I've wanted to have these expectations here for some time. I don't think, more importantly, that the team is nervous about it. I don't think Mike Norvell is affected by it in any way. I don't think that kind of heat, that kind of talking point is going to bother this team at all. They are a team that when you listen to them collectively, individually, when you watch them practice, that feels like a team that has unfinished business. They're angry about what they had to go through, but they went through it. They put in the work. They did what they had to do to get into a place now where they can have these expectations of themselves. They strike me as a bunch that is kind of like, oh, nice of you to notice. Yes, don't mind if we do. We are going to take this conference this year. You're right to favor us. We're really good. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be perfectly smooth sailing. It doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a hiccup. This team is not Georgia 2 years ago, where you looked out there and you went, sweet Jesus, I just don't see them losing a game other than the wear and tear of the collective battle of the SEC. It can happen. Road night games in that conference can be a toughie. But other than when you just looked at what they were, position by position, the depth of that talent, you went, man, that's the best team in the country. It's really not close. And then they proved it. They did have the hiccup 2 years ago, the one against Alabama. And they went on to win it and won the national championship. And then, of course, last year they won it all and back-to-back titles. And we know what they are, the juggernaut that they've been. Now, they're trying to do something no team has ever done, which is win back-to-back-to-back national championships. Nobody's ever done it. So we'll see if they do. As far as Florida State, when we talk about expectations, and I keep bringing that up, that's not us. We're not on that level. We're not trying to do something that's unprecedented. We're not that kind of team just yet. But we are certainly good enough to be talked about as a potential winner of the ACC. Oh, of course. And I think objective Clemson fans know it. Funny when you nudge your Clemson fans, the ones you know, the ones you talk to that might be capable of being objective about their program, where it's at currently, and what they're facing now with Florida State on the rise. Rightfully, they're not going to kowtow to Florida State. They shouldn't have to. They've owned us over a decade now, basically a decade. They've owned us. It's brutal to have to admit. I hate it. But that's our reality, much the way we owned them for eternity prior to this run that they've been on. Fine. We can acknowledge both. But if you're being realistic, you know Florida State's close. They may even be ready. The one thing keeping Clemson fans back from saying that I agree Florida State should be the favorite to win the ACC, the one thing besides pride is that game's at Clemson. And you're going to say, look, man, I get it. But to be the man, you got to beat the man, and you haven't beaten us in 8 years, 9 years, whatever the hell it is. Come on in here and get it. If that's a road night game with everything on the line, yeah, man, that ain't easy because that's the lone spot in the ACC not named Doak Campbell Stadium that is very hard for people to go into and win. It's a hard place to play. We know. We were down on the field. They're breaking noise records and everything else. Now, we own that ass on that night, but it is difficult when they care. And they're going to care because they feel the pressure. They know what's coming down the pike.
Yeah, they do. And what I'd say is, now with divisions being gone, this bet is not about, okay, can you eliminate your intra-division rival on the way to Charlotte? It's not about that anymore because you beat him once, you might see him again.
You probably will see him again.
You probably will. North Carolina and Clemson have a tilt in November, which will be very interesting one way or the other for us. Whether we win on the road at Clemson or we don't, you'll either be looking at your competition, as long as we take care of business from there. The thing I'd say, though, is when you tie ACC championship to Florida State, immediately our fans think playoff and then the next prize, the biggest prize in the
Unless
game,
you
which
lose
is
to
the national
Clemson.
championship.
Unless you lose to LSU.
Correct. But what I'd say is this gets really interesting really fast because the last national championship team that we had was one of a kind. I mean, it's middle 90s Nebraska and us in the last 30 years that have been that dominant, that consistently over the course of the season to, the championship game
Ass
until
whippings.
you get, yes. This won't be that, I don't think. Even though we are the ACC favorite, there's going to be a game that's not named Clemson on this schedule this year. We circle Pitt blindly right now because of where it is and where it fits on the schedule.
Just as a potential sort of outlier that you don't see right now. Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be smooth sailing for this group in every game, where in the second half, you got Jordan Travis putting his feet up and the guys are playing hangman on the sidelines. This is not that type of season that's coming forward. But at plus 160, I'm surprised. I'm surprised that everybody is hip to Florida State in the Sharp community as much as they are. I didn't expect that this far ahead of kickoff in August.
I think they're
September.
fading Clemson a little bit. There's been chinks in the armor. You could see it coming a little bit. They've had some little bumps in the road that they haven't had previously. They didn't look like a dominant team, even with that defensive line that they had. They still had problems every week with a lot of people that, from a talent standpoint, they shouldn't have had. They've had some coaching changes. Meanwhile, at Florida State, they survived this stretch where you didn't know whether the coach, who you liked, was still going to be around and have any momentum. They survived that run, came out the other side smelling like roses, not only looking good, but then the roster retention. And it starts with your quarterback, who proved himself to be one of the best 10 quarterbacks in college football last year. So now all of a sudden that kid comes back to go along with his top receiver, and you gave him tight ends, and you finally have an offensive line, like a legitimate top 10 in the country offensive line. Everybody saw Trey Benson last year. It didn't take that much research for people to realize, man, they got them a tight end now, 2, 3 tight ends. Okay. The question is only going to be about the defense. And you can almost come back with a retort immediately when I say that with, how can they not be better, even with warts in the back end? How can they not be better with a defensive line that is that deep that will force teams to be one-dimensional? They have to be better. All of a sudden, pass rushes get home when it's third and obvious every possession. I mean, you can pin the ears and make this happen now. I think you're set as your starters at linebacker. I don't love them. I certainly don't love them in coverage. They're adequate enough if they stay clean. And they'll stay clean because of that defensive line. You have an elite pass rusher on one side and a rising star on the other. If they stay injury-free there, and that's a big if, why we lack depth in certain key positions, why we're not Georgia, there's no reason they can't be much better against the good offenses they faced, that they'll face this year that they weren't good against last year. Will they be elite? Will they be championship level? Again, I don't think so. That's up for debate. I don't think they're championship level at linebacker. They're not proven championship level in the secondary at all. So, we'll see.
Yeah, just when you look at that board and you see what those numbers are, and again, it's a plus 160 at 8-5.
Yeah,
that's what it translates to. I just don't know that I see the value in that pick. You know what I mean? As a bettor, I look at it from a completely different perspective.
At plus 160, you don't?
No, I think one injury to one player, one key player, and that whole thing crumbles. If we were 3-1, or 2.5 to 1, maybe at that point I'd feel compelled. Like last year was 7.5 was the win total for the season. 7.5.
Yeah, you and I both took the over. Yeah,
buddy, I couldn't wait.
We jumped on it. Yeah, we both jumped on that. Yeah.
The value was through the roof.
Yeah.
Now, we saw in practice, but they had the spring showcase. Everybody got to see what the working pieces were. This was going to be a team that was going to exceed 7.5 wins. They were just going to do it. Now for ACC championship thresholds, and I'm the guy who says it's playoff or bust this year. I'm just saying, from a bettor's perspective, I don't know that there's a ton of value there at plus 160. Florida State being the odds-on favorite, there's just a couple of places where a key injury and this whole thing is derailed, and you're looking at a 9-win season, and unfortunate.
You're defining the difference between the elite championship level programs and the ones who are climbing the mountain to get to that place. And that is Alabama suffers injuries, Georgia suffers injuries, Ohio State suffers injuries, and they've got a 5-star kid or an elite transfer portal player or somebody to fill in for that guy that just left, because they have that kind of depth at every layer. Now, again, you can always argue, rightfully so, that there are very few teams that if they were to lose their starting quarterback aren't adversely affected to the point where they're no longer in consideration for a championship. Yeah, that's fair.
And some of those programs you just listed would be included in that discussion. They'd have to.
Correct.
I mean, last year, if Bryce Young went down, Alabama loses
screwed.
How many games?
Well, they couldn't defend.
Yeah, exactly.
And now all of a sudden you don't have a guy pulling a rabbit out of his hat every Saturday, just running around with eyes in the back of his head. They'd have been in damn big trouble. So yes, it's rare anybody survives that. So we won't count this as you're worried about a key injury to quarterback. You mean wide receiver, linebacker, safety.
Well, personally, I do mean quarterback when it comes to the value
of the bet.
Now, I say, buckle up, baby. This is going to be one hell of a ride, and I think it's going to the playoff. That's one thing. But then when you're telling me to lay down
real money,
it's a different consideration in terms of the risk versus the value. If it was paying out higher, love it. I love it. At 10, that's the one that I'm going, It's not 10.5. And I think your recommendation last week at the over-under 10 is why not play it? It's a push at worst. At worst, you're looking at 10.
It is a push at worst. That schedule sucks. We're going to beat that ass. Most Saturdays are butt kickings being delivered. Most Saturdays just doling out butt kickings. There's the exceptions, maybe three Saturdays where that's not going to be the case. Now maybe there's score.
And one slip up. There's going to be one.
Oh, there's a game where you're like, man, that wasn't pretty. 27-10. That was a little shaky. But I don't think there. Are you predicting there's a game that we're not talking about on the schedule where late in the fourth it's tied?
Could be.
A game that Florida State is currently a huge favorite in?
Well, a huge favorite or not. I mean, again, I go back to the situation with NC State.
That was awful.
And, I mean, the quarterback couldn't complete a forward pass. And we invented a way to lose that football game.
We did because we didn't trust our sorry-ass kicker.
That's partially the reason. But, outside of the kicker trust issues, you've got a lot of opportunities, a lot of possessions to do something, anything, and win the football game, even by 3.
That's where I keep getting back to this receiving core not being elite. They dropped everything that Saturday night. They couldn't catch the ball, and they have a bit of a dropsies issue to begin with. And then the quarterback got frustrated and didn't handle himself very well and showed immaturity for the first time ever and kind of came outside of his normal way he comports himself. So I think he learned from that, though. I don't think you'd see that again. No, I don't think panic would set in again.
No, the Florida game is a great retort to the NC State game.
Yeah. It's like, okay, things aren't going well. We can't get a stop. I got to score every time. All right, here we go. Let's go.
Drops again. Like, it's all crumbling around him, and he finds a way to engineer us into the
trailing in the Oklahoma game significantly early on. I mean, couple scores, and your best receivers dropping touchdown passes again, and here we are going. God, dog.
He still went for 2 bills.
Of course he did, because that's who he is. He's got hang in there. He'll make the catch. It'll be the one that you can never predict because it's behind him, and his head he's flipping over backwards and barely finding a way to get a toe down. He'll make that catch. God forbid he's wide open in the middle of the field with nobody within 50 yards. He's dropping that all day, every day. So there you go. They responded.
So the question, there's one of the favorite words of the head coach. Should Florida State be the betting favorite in the ACC?
Yes.
All right.